Rakesh arrived at the village with a briefcase full of audit papers that made no logical sense. In the world of government oversight, numbers are supposed to follow a pattern, but the records for this specific district had hit a mathematical wall. This graph tracks the enrollment of the local primary school over a single year. It begins with 75 children. Within months, that number drops to 19. By the time Rakesh was sent to investigate, the attendance had bottomed out at 0. As a state-educated official, Rakesh viewed the world through the lens of policy and infrastructure. He was sent to find out if the school was missing supplies, or if the teachers had simply stopped showing up. The reality on the ground was far more jarring. Walking through the village, he found the streets and courtyards completely devoid of life. There were no voices, no games, and no children to be seen in any direction. He eventually found a small group of children tucked away in an abandoned temple, but they weren't just playing. They were huddled around a mud figure, acting out a rhythmic, disturbing ritual that ended with one child pretending to offer another to the flames. When he confronted the Sarpanch, the leader gave him nothing but hollow excuses about parents losing interest in the curriculum. Standing in the corner was Agoram, the local priest, whose silent, menacing presence suggested that the authority in this village didn't come from the government. The missing students in the ledger were a direct result of the village's collective silence. Rakesh realized the data wasn't showing him a failure of the education system. It was showing him a community-wide effort to hide a horrifying secret. The silence was the product of a generational terror tied to a figure they called Mulak Dev. In the local folklore, this wasn't a benevolent protector, but an ancient force that demanded a terrible price for the village's survival. The idol of Mulak Dev was described as a massive bronze figure with the head of a bull and a human body. At its core was a fiery furnace set directly into the stomach, designed to consume whatever was placed inside. The villagers believed in a simple, brutal transaction. They could choose to sacrifice a child to the flames, or the entire community would be wiped out by famine and plague. To them, the ritual was the only thing keeping the harvests alive. This belief system was enforced by the neighbors themselves. When a widow named Sarla tried to hide her son, the village turned on her, physically dragging the child away while she was pinned to the ground by her own neighbors. Under the weight of manufactured existential dread, the unthinkable becomes a community standard. The villagers weren't acting out of malice, but out of a desperate, twisted conviction that their own children were the only currency that could buy their safety. Rakesh's investigation was a threat to this order. Agoram attempted to stop the inquiry by drugging Rakesh's drink, hoping a night of heavy sleep would give him enough time to finish the next ritual. The sedative didn't hold. Rakesh woke from a fractured sleep and looked out toward the ruins on the edge of the village, where he saw the unnatural orange glow of a fire burning against the night sky. He moved through the woods in silence, following the smell of smoke until he reached the crumbling walls of the old temple. There, he found Agoram standing before the furnace, preparing for another sacrifice. Rakesh stepped into the light of the fire, openly challenging the priest. He called the ritual a fraud, accusing Agoram of using local superstitions to cover up what was, in reality, a string of murders. Agoram didn't bother to maintain the act. He stood his ground and laughed, admitting that he didn't serve a god at all. He told Rakesh that the deity was a mask used to command the village through fear. The priest's true goal was personal. He believed that by consuming the life force of these children over a 7-year cycle, he could achieve a form of physical immortality, leaving the village to wither once his own needs were met. This was the collision of two opposing forces: Rakesh's commitment to an evidence-based audit and Agoram's calculated use of terror. While one man was trying to account for the living, the other was harvesting them to sustain himself. Rakesh hadn't come to the ruins alone. He brought the villagers to the edge of the temple, forcing them to stand in the shadows and hear the priest's confession for themselves. The paralyzing fear of Mulak Dev began to warp into a different, more volatile emotion. The villagers realized the safety they had purchased with their children's lives was a lie, and the man they looked to for protection was the very person orchestrating their tragedy. The grief of decades of loss suddenly focused on a single target. Led by an elder who had lost his own grandson years ago, the crowd surged forward, no longer afraid of the priest's supposed powers. They seized Agoram and forced him back toward the heat of the furnace, eventually throwing him into the same flames he used to terrorize them. A cult of personality is built on the idea that a leader possesses a secret truth. When exposed as a self-serving fraud, the leader's power vanishes, leaving the community to face the reality of what they allowed to happen. Years passed, and the village seemed to heal. The school reopened, the fields remained green, and the memory of Malakdev was treated as a dark, finished chapter. But one night, the sound of a shovel hitting stone echoed through the ruins once again. A lone figure was digging relentlessly in the exact spot where the temple of Malakdev had been demolished years ago. From the dirt, he pulled a familiar artifact, the heavy, bull-headed mask of the Malakdev idol, its metal surface still stained by the soot of the old furnace. The figure was Agoram's son. He began to recite the mantras his father had taught him. He was attempting to draw the ancient spirit back into the world, desperate to begin the horrifying cycle of fear anew. Exposing a fraud can save a village for a generation, but superstition is a resilient disease. Unless the commitment to reason is passed down as carefully as the legends, the demons of the past will always be waiting to be dug up.